I think there was maybe a world record on VP rollouts as far as how much the the blowback has come back. Originally, I think it was maybe J.D. Vance with weird cat lady comments. Now it's questions about Tim Walz's military record. So they were just, I guess, trying to match each other. But it seems like you have two very energetic candidates. Or maybe now America's starting to realize who they are and they're coming into their own. What do you make of both of their rollouts so far? Because it seems like each is filled with a lot of Oppo research and a lot of folks that are on both sides of this really sticking it to the other candidate. It seems like there's a lot there for both of them.
Well, look, you learn more about yourself when you run for the highest or the second highest office in the land than you thought you knew. Both parties had detailed opposition research books on J.D. Vance and on Tim Waltz. They were ready to pounce. And, just like Tim and I know with our clients, you're never more popular than the day you were hired. And this is a case where the VPs are going to get beaten up because the bar of scrutiny is much lower when they run for lower offices. And now everything that they've said throughout their careers is going to be analyzed and overanalyzed and picked across. And any advantage that the Republicans can make over Tim Waltz or the Democrats can make over J.D. Vance, they're going to jump on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we haven't seen this level of scrutiny really kind of on both sides. Republicans took it with Sarah Palin a few years ago, and Democrats took that advantage and opportunity. Years and years ago, Republicans took it with Dan Quayle. But we haven't really seen it on both sides like we're getting it right now. I mean, now America is fully aware of who J.D. Vance and Tim Waltz were, as you would have asked America 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and they would have no idea, could never pick these guys out of a lineup. And now suddenly everybody's an expert on both of their backgrounds. So we're going to see more. I do suspect that the veteran questions about Waltz's service are going to long term probably have a little bit more substantive shelf life than what we're seeing, at least initially, from the Democrats on Vance. But we'll wait to see.
Well, imagine you have Democratic operatives and folks that are enthused about voting that are thinking, man, that was couldn't have asked for a better rally to start, with Shapiro being, very, humble in not accepting the nomination, being able to do 20 minutes of what's been praised so far as a great speech. Then you follow that up with Tim Waltz, who this kind of introduction to him, and he's very vibrant. I know the concern out of the gate with him was that, he doesn't look like he's terribly vibrant, and that's hairline discrimination, I think. But he is, and he's a great public speaker. And then you had now a few days after that, you start to see this slow rollout of what we've seen as talked about with Oppo Research. And now there's still a few months to the election. You're going to have a debate sometime in between. Is it beneficial for both those candidates to go to the debate, or is there a high risk, high reward thing? Because as we've seen, you don't have to show up to debates anymore in this current climate.
Well, members in politics are short. I mean, don't forget, Trump survives an assassination attempt. The Republicans have arguably their most successful convention since Ronald Reagan ran for office. That is not in the past. That's now in the history books. It's so long ago. And now we're talking about the big mo for Kamala Harris and for Governor Tim Walz. Look, the reality is that Trump and Vance will likely be behind coming out of the Democratic convention. I think it's not only advantageous, but it's expected that the presidential candidates will appear on the same stage together. All they're doing now is they're debating about the debates, and it just builds a heightened level of interest. They're ultimately going to square off at least once. So will J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Waltz. And I think that both of those will, unless one of the candidates pulls a Biden, which I think has now become a term in common use, they will be largely insignificant in the race. But it's kind of a bar that both campaigns have to cross.
Yeah, this race is about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. The Waltz and Vance kind of bylines are interesting theater right now. They will be complementary to their candidates. I'm not sure, Vance does not necessarily get Trump a ton of crossover, helps maybe in some ways with the veterans community. Kamala Harris did a touche with that with Waltz, but I think that's the touche was probably a little premature. I'm not sure what Tim Walz gets for Kamala Harris, Minnesota. Donald Trump can lose Minnesota and still, win this election. So really, when it gets down to it, you have the focus on Trump and Harris, those debates that they are going to have, and what comes out of those debates. And ultimately, that's what voters are really going to be keying on. I mean, that's the decision point, right? You're not electing a vice president, you're electing a president, and it becomes the debate, it becomes the contrast between those two candidates. And there is no bigger contrast that we've seen, in recent years than Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, in terms of two candidates running for the highest office.
It seemed like the one thing you got with Waltz that you maybe didn't get with Shapiro is energizing maybe progressives in Wisconsin and Michigan that maybe were happy to sit it out. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be for the Palestinian reason, could be for all those other things. But now you have a progressive governor of Minnesota. Should be noted, Minnesota picks not always the greatest as far as presidential records are concerned, and vice presidential picks are concerned. It's an odd state. Republican hasn't won there since Nixon had won there in '72. But in the same respect, Minnesota was starting to come into play this time around. Is a pick like that, like a Waltz pick, to try and energize progressives in the Midwest and maybe progressives in general across the country, where you had maybe a lot of folks that were disenfranchised, particularly younger voters, just a couple months ago when Biden was still the head of the ticket?
If Kamala Harris needs to energize progressives, she's in deeper trouble than either Tim or I could have predicted. Look, the pick of Governor Waltz is a bit of a head scratcher. Speaking for the follically challenged, Will, to comment on what you said.
No. You have more hair there than Governor Waltz.
No, but I mean, look, which is it? Is Governor Waltz going to motivate the progressive base, or is Governor Waltz going to solidify those rural voters? I have to tell you, I've looked at the rural voting data from Minnesota. Governor Waltz wins the populated areas, and he loses badly in the rural parts of the state. So, again, the Republicans are collectively breathing a sigh of relief over Tim Waltz being pulled into this campaign. I think it would have been a much, much more difficult campaign if Senator Kelly from Arizona were selected. I mean, you want to have the military argument. J.D. Vance was, yes, he was in Iraq, but he was a public affairs enlisted person in Iraq. Senator Kelly was a fighter pilot. Or you go to, Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He's a moderate, but guess what? He's on the wrong side from the teachers' unions, big Dem contributors on the school choice issue. And he's an ardent defender of Israel, which used to be a Democratic position. But with the rise of the Hamas caucus in the Democratic Party, they're not going to allow that to intrude on their progressive mindset, where the victim mentality rises to the top, irrespective of whether it's America's strongest ally in the region or not.
Yeah, the pick clearly showed who really pulls the puppet strings of the Democratic Party. It's the far extreme left, right? And they needed something. They couldn't go Shapiro, couldn't go Kelly. And Kamala went as close to a California pick as she could without going full California. Yeah. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. She wanted a California-style progressive left pick. That's really where she's comfortable. That's where she would love to run, but has to move a little bit to the middle, or at least try to. So she couldn't take a Californian and couldn't pick a Californian. So she went to Minnesota, who, if you look at Minnesota under the leadership of Governor Walz, has followed kind of lockstep with what Gavin Newsom has done here in California, just with a little bit different packaging on it. And so that's really what the Harris campaign did with the Waltz pick. And, that does play to progressives, but I'll tell you, it is not going to pick up or really do anything in order to move those swing voters that they need to move over into her camp. Kamala Harris still has a problem there. The Trump campaign has a problem there too. They've got to pull those people into their camp. But the vice presidential picks on either side really doesn't do a whole lot to swing those voters in those key states, as I see it, into one or the other's camp. And that's what is going to make the difference in terms of winning Pennsylvania, making sure that you're winning a Michigan, making sure that you're winning those seats that you have to win in order to become the next president.
Tim, you pick up on something though that we should spend some time on. Look, I mean, Donald Trump's first instinct is to attack, right? I mean, he wants to just leave scorched earth in his wake. Yeah. The problem though is, and Kamala Harris is not talking about what she will do. Her whole campaign is Donald Trump equals evil equals threat to democracy. That's all she's got.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump could focus on the Biden-Harris record and then spend even a modicum of time talking about what his agenda would be for 2024 and beyond, I think that voters would flock to him. But Donald Trump seems, in my mind, at least right now, committed to reminding people who hate Donald Trump why they hate him.
Yeah.
And that's the part, I mean, it drives me, it's like nails on a chalkboard. If he could just talk about how he's going to grow the economy, how he's going to close the border. I mean, you're in this, you run candidates all the time. I mean, you have to project that vision, right?
Yeah, I think so. In order to pull those swing voters, right, you've got to give them something. I mean, these voters want substance, and you've got both sides, like you said, Matt. I mean, they're going, hey, lobbying, artillery into one camp, and the other camp is lobbying artillery into the other camp, and they're going at it. Voters, if you're going to swing them, they need something to kind of hang their hat on. And right now, the top issues in the country is economy, and then you go kind of down from that. Kind of public safety, but really economy is what's going to drive everything. That should favor Republicans. It should favor Trump, and he should have a lot of runway there. He cannot cede any ground on that. And you see, a few folks like the Mike Huckabees and the even former Vice President Mike Pence and others, kind of articulating the fact that, hey, like you said, Matt, Trump needs to talk about substance. He needs to talk about the issues. We got to get out of the name calling, because Harris is doing name calling just as much as Trump is doing name calling, just not getting called on it by the press, national press for the most part. But they're both doing name calling right now, and they really need to get onto, or at least Trump needs to, like you said, get onto the substance. If he can do that, I mean, we're playing to Republican wheelhouse right now in terms of issues that are going to motivate voters.
I'm just wondering, where that whole, I mean, because you don't remember it from the speech, but you remember in the lead up to the speech, just even the tax on tip issue, right? Because that seemed to be very appealing to a lot of people. And just even if he had hit on that in the RNC speech and the speeches to follow, even if it's the smallest issues that maybe are even state level issues, you think that would maybe be, a really good message to hit on, because he has that. And then also, of course, I know he can't help himself, but he has both those messages going at the same time. I think people are familiar with the other part of him, which is the self-description and all that. But it does seem like a winning issue, especially in those Midwestern states, and especially in states where, Vance talks about in his book that are hit hard and that he has the background in. And I'm sure Walz will play that up as well and play to his own policies too. Is there anything from Walz's time as governor that sticks out to anybody as far as what he's, well, sticks out in that way? I know which way you're about to go, but I mean, sticks out in the way of policy, because I don't think there is, from a perspective of helping middle class people in Minnesota. We haven't necessarily heard that yet. As far as the rest of the record, which I know you're about to jump in on, yes, we're going to hear about it for months.
No, look, to be fair, I mean, we'll try to be at least the slightest bit, cut it down the middle. If you agree that the role of government is to provide a robust social safety net for those in society who need help, then you'll love Tim Walz. The problem is that the people who need help becomes pretty much everybody under Governor Tim Walz's scheme. He wants a much more aggressive government. in terms of providing housing for people that are in this country illegally. He is notable. He did pass legislation to mandate tampons in the boys' bathrooms in Minnesota high schools. That's a good thing. I feel safer with that. Look, he's soft on crime. I mean, he is a textbook progressive Democrat, and you would think that if Kamala Harris thought that she was going to pivot back to the middle, Governor Waltz is the antithesis of what that pivot back means. I think Tim nailed it when he said that, if you like Governor Newsom, we didn't say it exactly, but he is Governor Newsom if Governor Newsom were from Minnesota. Tim,
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, Waltz is Governor Newsom in overalls, right? I mean, that's what it is. And on the positive side, they're going to say, look, we've got headquarters of companies like Target and those types of things here in Minnesota. Well, okay, you have them until you don't, and we're seeing the effect of those policies here in California, where you've got the Teslas and the Amazons and the Chevrons and big huge companies that employ lots and lots of people and lots of jobs that are moving to other states. It just so happens the cost of living in Minnesota is probably quite a bit lower than it is in California, just because of location and a variety of other things. But that's kind of what we're looking at here is, the fact that the effect of these policies on Minnesotans, on Californians, on Americans. The extension of that is what you see the next 4 years if you've got Kamala Harris and Tim Waltz in the White House, and that is something voters. I always go back to this. Voters vote in their self-interest, right? And kitchen table issues. And what is it that's going to make, me and put my family in a better position? And if they feel like Donald Trump can articulate the fact that, he's going to cut taxes, he's going to give you back more of your money, you're going to have better spending power, jobs are going to be better, cost of living is going to be lower, all of those things. Okay, great. I'm going to check the box for Donald Trump. If you believe that, hey, really the government can, as Matt said, provide this vast safety net that will support you and will make your life better and do all of those things. Okay, then you're going to vote for the Waltz Harris ticket, whoever can articulate that vision, because ultimately that's where they're coming from. Those two sides, they can package it different ways, but that's really the philosophies and ideologies that they're coming to, and they've got to sell that to the American people and those voters that are not the partisans. Right, they're in the middle, and they just want to make sure that I can afford to send my kids to school, I can make rent, and I can have enough to commute back and forth to work with the gas I've got to pay, and hey, maybe take a vacation and do some other things that I really would like to do, and right now I just can't do that. So whoever's going to give them that, that's where the swing voters are going to go.
Right, and I think that's going to be the interesting thing, because you have Kamala Harris, and she's not necessarily. It's fascinating to me because it doesn't seem like she's running, and maybe this is from trying to get those swing voters in, but she's not running with her background being in California at all. It's like just trying to distance herself as much as she can because I don't know, she wants to be associated with Gavin Newsom, and even though she wants to be associated with Newsom in overalls, although for those of the political memory, maybe Jerry Brown in overalls is better because of but. That could be a
Jerry Brown could definitely pull off the overalls.
Dude, you and the hair again. What's with the hair going on? What's up? Look, Kamala Harris right now is running a campaign based on nothing except attacking Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And the challenge is that the mainstream media is giving her a complete pass. They're not asking her to, one, defend the Biden-Harris record of the last 1,300 days that they have held office, which is not a good record in terms of economic prosperity or open borders or crime. And they're not asking her what her policy projections are for the future. So until she's forced to step up to the plate and swing the bat, she's just going to let pitches go by. Life would be great if everything were about kitties and puppy dogs and she can giggle and smile and have, Governor Waltz talk about drinking Diet Mountain Dew and coaching football. But I would hope that with an unstable world, with facing potentially war in at least 2 locations, maybe 3, and with the economy on jittery footing, that we would at least force both presidential campaigns to talk about what they're going to do in the future. And right now, that's just not happening.
Yeah, if Trump can make this about policy, Trump and Vance will win. If Kamala and Waltz can keep this on personality, and the mainstream national media certainly is supporting as much as they can, then they will certainly have the advantage on personality. And that's really what this campaign comes down to. And I think that's what both sides, both camps are hoping for. And we'll see who can pull that off. It's personality versus policy, and that's the reality that we're going to see here over the next 3-4 months.
I was going to say, oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just going to say, Tim, you nailed it. That is the next following the Democratic convention. Tim is right. It's can the Trump Vance ticket highlight what Biden and Harris has messed up and offer solutions to that, or is it orange man bad, democracy in peril? You have no choice but to vote for me. And she hopes voters will hold their nose and say, I hate Donald Trump more than I'm worried about the nation's future.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say, I had one last question, but now I kind of want to have two last questions because of something Tim touched on, which is that it doesn't seem like it's highlighted enough that she's not talking to media, and her campaign's really not talking to media as much. And there's just kind of this level of enthusiasm that seems to continue to be rising because there hasn't been an opportunity to ask a lot of questions of her in her campaign and where she stands on issues and her role as vice president so far. I mean, we reached out and she said, not until you have your name on the logo, and then now it's here. So I'm waiting at some point for them to kind of talk to media, because it seems like there's a lot of substance that folks want to talk to her about. But so far, it's kind of been this free ride where there hasn't been a lot of, I guess the word would be accountability for her campaign so far and for questions that people have. And it seems like now, as close as we are to the convention, they want to ride it out into the convention. Then afterwards, as you were both saying, that's when the questions will start to be, I guess, allowed as opposed to being asked, because the questions are being asked.
Yeah, let me just mention, it's Gavin Newsom's playbook. I mean, how often, right? He doesn't. Gavin Newsom doesn't talk to California press, right? I mean, this is Gavin Newsom's playbook. And Kamala Harris is not talking to national press, and they're not holding her accountable for it. How many national, news outlets led last night with the fact that J.D. Vance walked over to Air Force Two and held an impromptu press conference, and Kamala Harris still had nothing to say to the press, right? Nobody did. I think maybe Fox News National did, or at least put that in their story. I don't know if they led with it, but nobody did. And you don't see that on the cover of any newspaper this morning, right? If this was flipped and a Republican was doing that and a Democrat kind of impromptu walked out in front of Air Force Two or Air Force One, it would be the lead story on, LA Times, New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, CNN, everybody be covering it. Why right? We're not seeing that. And that's okay. Hey, we've got to take that. And that's kind of part of the game, right now. But the fact is that, I think that the Republicans, that Vance, that Trump need to continue to kind of put themselves out there, take things directly to the people. And if they do that, eventually Harris and Vance are going to be forced, or Harris and Waltz will be forced to kind of come out of hiding.
But it's been recent too. Sorry, Matt, I just want to say, but
no, please go ahead.
Because how many times did you get like a Trump Florida counter when he was flying down to Florida and people thought he was avoiding press conferences? And then how many times has Biden gone to, Delaware during his time in office? And the same question hasn't been asked, and the same standard hasn't been applied when he's spending the same weekends that Trump was doing down there. And you just don't have that same level of accountability. You don't have that question about where the press conferences are, because clearly it's there. I mean, unless the press over there doesn't seem to, want to report on that, but it's not the same standard. And I'm speaking as someone who's in Bakersfield, not in Sacramento, who likes to get interviews as well with people. But
it's the like Donald Trump's doing a press conference today. So I mean, Donald Trump, remembering his time in the White House, how many times would he just walk into the press room and step up to the podium? And I mean, he over communicated in some cases. He was too available to the press at large, and they were asking things that frankly were not in his best interest to answer, but he answered them anyway. The flip of it is, this is the Joe Biden strategy, largely campaign in your basement during COVID in 2020. And Harris, who's known for word salad when she talks about things, and which to compound the problem, she's also known for not doing her homework, not listening to advisors, and not studying her briefing book. So now that she is the top of the pyramid, people want to know where she stands. And if she doesn't or can't articulate where she stands on key issues, like what happened to the stock market on Monday of this week, or what's happening with inflation. I mean, she says, I'm going to make inflation my top priority my first day in office. Where's she been for the last 1,300 days? What's going to be different? And if it's different, why doesn't the Biden-Harris ticket do it right now and give a preview to America of what she wants to do? She's a blank slate, and her people are purposefully leaving her amorphous and vague because, go back, Tim nailed it. I can't say it enough. They want a personality-driven campaign. If you hate Donald Trump, you default to me. I don't hear anybody saying, oh my gosh, I love Kamala Harris. Doesn't exist. So, I mean, that's the challenge. And news media needs to up their game, and right now they're failing.
See, you're going after the news media. I was going after the hair earlier. It's fun. It's just trading on this.
Turnabout's fair play, Will.
Exactly. Well, I want to do one last question to tie this home. You guys have been here longer than you should. Sorry about that. I know we're running over a little bit, but I would just want to ask, tying this back here to the Central Valley, what importance is the Waltz pick, particularly on the race in CA 22? It's about energizing people who don't always turn out to the polls. A lot of times that's folks who live in our farm worker communities. Does a Waltz pick, does the way that Harris is going to run her campaign, will that energize voters in the Central Valley and particularly in California 22?
I'm going to say no. And I don't see what the Waltz pick or what Harris in general brings to, particularly with Latino voters who need to come out, and vote and turn out one way or the other. And they're going to be a swing vote in that seat. And I don't know what they bring to the table than what we had before. I think that's going to be driven by local politics. Certainly, you're going to have kind of base Democrats and base Republicans that are going to come out regardless. But this is still, that seat is still going to be about local, kitchen table issues and who those voters believe can best deliver on those promises. And so far, I think that campaign, and those campaigns have shown that that's where they're going after. But I don't know that really impacts, turnout significantly, particularly in that district, based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think look, Kamala Harris, if Kamala Harris is not going to spend a lot of time in California between now and November, unless she's coming to pick up checks. But I think the thing to look for is, do Democratic candidates across the United States want to spend time with Kamala Harris when she comes into their state or into their district? I already know that Sherrod Brown is not doing it in Ohio. I wonder why. Because he's a progressive who wants to run to the middle. Kamala Harris is making no pretense about where she's going to be a progressive Democrat. And that's why I think in California, especially in the Central Valley, you're going to get people trying to run on local issues and how they can deliver for their constituents, as opposed to talking about the national sphere. So and we know Kamala in California. She was here long. She represented the state longer than she has been on the national scene. So we know her warts and all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'll just add, in San Francisco, she is from San Francisco. She lives in Los Angeles. She is not putting on a pair of work boots and a work shirt and jumping on a John Deere in the Central Valley. That is not what she's doing. That'll look about as natural as Michael Dukakis in a tank,
Exactly.
from 1988. And so, is that something Tim Waltz can do? I'm not convinced that he's going to be coming out to California and doing that much either. So, really it is, what Matt said. She's trying to run away from California about as hard as she could. She even adopted a Georgia accent the other day. So I wouldn't expect to see her here much, like as Matt said, unless she's collecting a check.
Hey, who needs Tim Waltz here when you have a governor in Sacramento who's Tim Waltz with hair gel? So
that's right.
That's the other side of the coin.
Tim Waltz with a hair gel or Gavin Newsom in overalls. Either way.
I will say he was down here last week to speak with us on the fire. He came down and took 2 questions and jetted on out. But I made it a great 2 questions for him. So
good,
exciting,
excellent.
Well, thank you so much. I asked more than 2 questions here and we went well over the time that I was given for you guys. But thank you so much. I appreciate it as always. And
hey, not a problem. Anytime.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Take care, Matt.
Bye, Tim.
Take care.